Let's talk about a bit about the compositor or post-processing. So here's the thing about post-processing. Because the way we've been doing it for years is first we build an image, right? We in Blender, for example, in 3D, or we paint it in Photoshop. We spend like X amount of hours, like 20, 30 hours, and then at the end it's called post-processing, right? We do post-processing after our image is done or after our render is done, meaning we're gonna spend our time building scene in Blender, then we're gonna press F12, we're gonna render the sheet, right? And then we're gonna import it back to Photoshop for post-processing, or we're gonna start doing compositor nodes post-processing in Blender. But here's the thing, we don't have to do it at the end anymore. Every time I start my Blender scene, immediately I'm starting adding posts right at the beginning, and I'm gonna tell you about mine, why maybe right now. I want to add compositor nodes immediately because you just get away with way more if your object is if your scene is already color graded. But I don't want to confuse you. There is no point in having compositor set up on your empty scene. What I'm trying to get at is, if I open my Blender file, I already have a bunch of nodes in here, and I want to talk you through those nodes first, and then I'm gonna tell you why I have those nodes already set up. Because talk about it later, Piotr. Right, let's explain the nodes first. So always my first node will be RGB curves. I've noticed this one thing, that everything in Blender, it has to do with color profiles, I don't know, but everything in viewport is a bit more contrasty than the rendered output. Meaning, I've noticed it that whenever I was building my Blender scene, the shit looks juicy in here, but whenever I've rendered the image and I imported the rendered image into Photoshop, it felt like it was less contrasty. So, I mean, based on this, and in general, I always want to push my contrast in my scenes, but I never want to do it, push the contrast through film or color management in here and change like a look to very high contrast ones, because this is cool, but those are like 6 presets that are very limiting. So what I want to do instead, whenever I'm opening the scene, whenever I'm working on the scene, I already have a bunch of nodes preset on my scene, and just like with presetting my sun on HDRI, I will have a bunch of nodes hidden within one group. But I'm gonna get to grouping your nodes in a second, because first I want to explain the nodes quickly. So immediately I'm just gonna always add RGB curves, because this allows me to push more contrast in. And if I'm changing shit in here and it doesn't change in viewport, I'm just going over here and toggle the compositor to always. Right? But I find Blender curves to be, you want to fine-tune them, and you want to be very subtle and gentle how you move your sliders. And I'm not, I don't know, I found, what I want to say is, I find the RGB curves in Photoshop to be slightly more intuitive or easy to control. So what I'm trying to get at is, the next node I will add is RGB brightness contrast, and I will just push contrast in here slightly. Like so, but I don't want to do this, just slightly. And then what I want to do, I want to add an exposure node. We're gonna get into exposure node in a second, but whenever your image is a bit too dark, what you can, like, if your image is too dark in general, even if you have a sunlight, then you can do a bunch of things. You can either start increasing the brightness of your HDRI map, right? Or the other thing you can do, let's come the sun, is figure out, start messing around with exposure. Now, I prefer to work with exposure first, because guess what? I really want to fake the HDRI map, meaning this is natural color, this is natural sky. One thing is, though, the sky isn't emitting light correctly, but I'm gonna talk about it while showing you the volumetrics. But what I wanted to say is, this is just artificial. Now I'm like faking HDRI basically. I never want to do it, because lighting in Blender is, or any 3D software is, if you want to set it correct, you want to work with it the correct way. There is no reason for me to try and hack the lighting, right? So instead, if I want to increase the brightness of the scene, I will work with exposure, because this is just like how I'm imagining I'm taking photos, right? And I can change the exposure settings in my camera, but I will talk about exposure some more. Now the other node that I want to add is color balance, but here's where shit gets tricky, and I believe this is like an entirely different tutorial on its own. So what this will does, it messes the gain, or let's just, I don't want to talk in terms of lift, gamma, and gain. The way I'm looking at those wheels, those affect your brighter values, mid values, and dark values, right? So whenever I want to color grade something, then of course I'm gonna be moving the slider slightly. I never want to do this. Like I remember I shared my compositor setups with a bunch of artists, and immediately they started doing this. Pam, 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 pam. Whatever the post-processing you use, you always want to be subtle with your changes. And I can tell you this, that the reason why this gets tricky is if you want to color grade your image into, for example, let's talk about Games of Thrones shots. This is cool. Shot deck. Let's say I want to color grade my shot to be like this beautiful dark blue. If I'm just gonna start blindly pushing blue tones in my scene, oh sorry, this is blue, and blue, and blue, and blue, like it kinda won't work. And the reason why it won't work is if you look at the values of this shot, like you need to know your values, is you will learn that the reason why this shot appears so blue, or maybe this type of desaturated deep blue, it's only at the value range of like 6, 7, or 8 of value. Like you can see even the colors in here. So what I want to say is color grading your shot depends on from image to image, and the way you want to color grade your shot, it depends on the lighting. Because if I want to do this scene, for example, a deep, rich, dark, and blue, it means my sun has to be toned down. And this type of color grading, like this Game of Thronesy color grading, I've seen like a lot of people try to pull it off, and a lot of people, I was doing the same. I was trying to pull it off with like high emission range, with like sharp shadow and whatnot, right? And I've started tweaking the shaders. I mean, this already feels a bit more blue, just because of the difference of the value, right? Meaning my sun needs to just gently light my surfaces, meaning my surfaces need to be dark in order for me to color grade them this deep blue. Yoshi. So now I can adjusting the tones a bit, but I'm not gonna talk about in this tutorial how to do those shots. This is something I'm gonna save for a different tutorial, because this is fucking long. This will be long, talking about setting proper lighting in order to achieve this cinematic shot. But on the other hand, I don't want you to leave with nothing, so I'm gonna show you like a bunch of different presets, a different preset for like this maybe overly even like overexposed and cinematic shot. What I want to say is learning this is a lot of fucking, I don't know, this is a lot of knowledge in here that I would have to drop, and I'm not gonna do it in this tutorial, but I'm gonna differently. What I want to say, color grading is image specific, right? There is no one color grading to fucking rule them all, what I wanted to say. And I just don't have this amount of time to go into like how I'm gonna color grade 10 or 12 different images. I'm just gonna do a tutorial about this some other time. Maybe with some medieval images, or I really love this stuff, like how desaturated this feel, right? And I really love this stuff, but I don't like the fog and the all right, I'm getting distracted. So anyway, let's just continue explaining the nodes for now. So if I want to do color grading, then of course I'm gonna be very gentle with the color balance. But I know in order for color balance to work, or whatever different tones is, I either want to clamp my sun. I mean, clamp my sun, make my sun darker, or maybe I can do something else. I can just drop the curves in here, tone it down like so, push those up a bit maybe, and then I can start like color grading, right? But let's continue explaining the nodes. Whatever, the next node that I will always want to have is, let's add this one, image and mix color. Let's set it up to overlay. Let's find a noise map. I always want to add a touch of noise in my images. Meaning I have created a noise map in Photoshop. You just go into like, it's in the filter or I don't know where, you can create noise map within like a couple of clicks. And then I just want to import it into Blender, connect it into here, and I want to set it up to lower value. God damn it, my nose is running, sorry. So I have my noise map. Noise map, immediately what it will do, it will make your shot feel a bit more cinematic, right? And there is one last node that I always want to add. I'm just gonna copy this node and I'm gonna set it up to lighten. Lighten is, I consider lighten to be one of the more important nodes, because here's what happened. Here's what's gonna happen if you add lighten. Lighten helps you get rid of the of the darkest darks of pure blacks, because if whenever I highly encourage people to go through to get an account on a Shotdeck and just like start browsing images. And I've mentioned that white and dark, pure white and dark, it doesn't exist in nature. Meaning whenever you see a painting, right? Painter paints a painting and painter understands that I don't want to use whitest white and darkest dark. But the other thing is, what I want to say is, this is a painterly post-processing, right? Meaning that the values are evened up. There are no whitest whites and darkest darks. I consider this to be a painterly post-processing. But on the other hand, what you can do is push your images to feel a bit more cinematic, with like actually a bit or more of overexposed areas with whitest whites. But I'm gonna get to it later, because for now, what I want you to know is that I use lighten. Let's go over here. I use lighten because I want to get rid of the darkest dark in my image, darkest darks in my image. So I need to actually add a color. Let's go with something dark and something dark in here. So what I've done right now is I've went into my camera and I've increased my pass per out. And I'm using this not only to help me framing, but I'm using it as a reference for my colors. But by that I mean, this is pure black. I never want to see pure black in my images. As soon as you will see pure black in your images, your images won't look believable. And what lighten does is, you see those darker tones, the pure black tones. I mean, they're not pure black, but they're super dark. I would always have a lighten node and set it up to like 0.1 or 0.15, because, and then maybe start color picking, like different tone, because what I'm looking for in here, as black never exists in nature, or maybe differently, whenever there's black color, I want to color grade it into a different color. Meaning I don't want to have pure blacks at the darkest values. I want for those darkest values to be slightly lighter, which lightens does, right? And then I want those blacks to transition into some color. Like there, again, no pure blacks in nature, meaning if there is a black in your scene, you want to tint it towards like being a bit lighter, and you want to add a different color to it, right? Because this will unify your images. This will make your images feel much more eye-pleasing than just having this, for example. This is too crude, this is too much. And I'm just looking at the side of my frame and it's like, is this lighter than this pure black on the side of my frame? Yes, it is. All right, that's cool. I've added lighten. So I would say the most important nodes are RGB curves, exposure, color balance, lighten, and of course noise if I want to push the noise, right? But there's one other thing that I might want to do, a couple of other nodes that I might want to add. One of them will be camera lens, lens distortion, blur. Yes, my love. And one of the other nodes, bloom. No, it's called glare. So let's add those nodes. Now those are nodes I will be very careful with, and I will always, like lighten nodes will always comes last. So I want, for example, to add lens distortion in here. I'm adding a bunch of values. So what's happening right now is visible. Oh, it's working, all right. So those are lens distortion are basically like your camera lenses that will produce those type of artifacts, right? But I don't have like a specific setup for them. This helps me add a bit of smoothness into my images, but I always want to keep those values extremely low. Always, always, always. And if I'm not doing like, I'm trying to avoid doing this, right? And I'm not trying to do this. Meaning this will happen if you start messing around with your frames, with lens distortion. But I just want to like have a touch of it. And then I want to set it up maybe to projector. Like so. I'm so gentle, right? With the setting. All I want you need to know is that I might use this node because I hate like super sharp edges in my models, because I had this instinct that whenever I was doing something years ago, it has to be sharp, sharp, sharp. And then I was like using unsharp mask and sharpen shit in Photoshop, because my brain was telling me, dude, if you will do shit sharper in your image, it will look better. But the thing is, the better effect if you will have better effect if you follow the opposite way, meaning you will want for your edges not to appear super sharp in your image. And that's why I can use, for example, lens distortion, right? It adds like this, just a touch of unevenness to your image. But also I want to be very careful with the nodes, because it can distort your images too. So sometimes if I'm gonna use this node, like I want to keep it at extremely low value, and sometimes then when you're using lens distortion, might blur your image a bit too much. So this is like a trap. Be aware of it. Now the other thing that I want to do, if I'm not using lens distortion, or if I'm being like very generic, very generic, if I'm being very cautious with my lens distortion, then I can like add a bit of a blur, right? Because I want to soften the image, not sharpen them. And the last setup is pretty self-explanatory. This is just bloom. Right. I don't know why I prefer to work with low quality over the high quality. I don't know why. It has nothing to do with the performance, just like how the bloom feels like, right? So this is like my, because I don't want to confuse you. Like I'm not always using this lens distortion. I'm not always using blur, because sometimes I'll have my camera, sometimes I'll have my object placed in here, and sometimes I'll just want to add depth of field, focus on object like so, and then maybe slightly turn the ratio down. Oh, it won't work because it's further away from the camera, this object, right? Like so. So this solves the problem, right? But however, if stuff is like so, for some reason I'm not using depth of field, for some reason I'm not using ratio, then I might start using lens distortion and blur. But I want you to know this: if you add lens distortion and blur and depth of field, like you might overdo it, and your image might look blurry. So do I create the shader setup every time I start my Blender? No, the reason why is because if I have like a bunch of nodes in here, I'm just gonna press Ctrl. God damn it! Press Ctrl G and group my group of nodes, right? Meaning everything is grouped. If I want to edit the content of this group, I'm just gonna click tab. If I want to close it, I'm closing tab, right? I'm just saving as a post one. Now, so I'll want to group my nodes and like change the name to like post one, I don't know, 1. And I want to, for example, save this file. And the reason why I'm putting it in the node group is not because it's only like convenient to go in and out and everything is neatly organized. It's also because if I open a different blend scene and if I start working on it, Oh, it already has the preset. All right. Let's. Sometimes I will have nodes in my startup file, but sometimes if I keep working on an image, and I just keep working on it, sometimes I want to check a bunch of different shader setups or a bunch of different like post-processing that I've done. So what I would do then is, imagine this is like a slightly more polished scene, right? I either will start with like RGB, curve, all of those nodes I've mentioned, or what I would do is go into File, Append, and I'm just gonna look for the for one of the other files I've set up like post-processing, right? So I'm gonna go. I just want to borrow the node setup I had in this file I was working a couple of minutes ago, right? So I'm going into File, Append, going in here. I'm browsing through this file because I've created and placed everything within a group. I'm going into Node group, and here's my preset. All right, it's imported into the file. Now what I have to do is press Shift A, add. Type the name, and I have the exact same node. I've just carried over my shader setup from one of the previous files, right? So what I wanted to say is sometimes I have like a bunch of compositor presets scattered around along my different files or scenes I've been working with. So that's the one thing. But sometimes again, when I'm starting my file, I will have my nodes clean. But what I really wanted to say is I will always want to start setting up like at least some nodes as soon as I'm not in like solid block out this type of mode. What I wanted to say is, as soon as I'm starting to texture sheet, I will already want for my nodes to be doing something, meaning, like you see how, to me this is ugly, this is too distracting, meaning the darks in here, and you know what, let's push the HDRI a bit more. Like, I will never ever want in my image to have like those type of dark spots, and I'm looking at this black color for a reference, right? So what I wanted to say is, as I'm assembling the scene, sometimes as I'm adding textures to my shit, I'm not waiting with post-processing till the end. I'm also not like working with my post-processing immediately, meaning I'm gonna start working with my post-processing as soon as I will start adding some texture. So what I want to say, I will start fucking around with post-processing like within the first 2 or 3 hours, right? But the first thing I will be looking for is, I really those darks and blacks are distracting, and then I can start like maybe doing the overexposure shit. Or let's just focus on the darks because I don't want to, or maybe let's overexpose the texture, right? Like this is ugly, this is just so ugly, meaning this area feels like a bit overexposed, right? And goddamn, this is a bad example. What I wanted to say is, if I'm starting assembling the scene, I would already want to have my node set up in some way, and I'm looking for a way to get rid of those darks of those toughest spots, right? I already want my shadows to go into some sort of color. I want to start like color grading it a bit more, and because I have noise and because I have a bit of blur, it means whatever choices I will be making on my scene, they will be less forgiving. Let me show it maybe on one of my other scenes. All right, maybe I'm gonna make a bit more sense this way. So if I'm already, when I'm building my scene, right, when I'm in blockout mode or when I'm building the layout, of course I'm not worried about my compositor setup, but most often than not, I will just carry over my group of nodes from a bunch of different files, right? And when I go into rendered mode, I already want for my nodes to do something. But it's at this point I still haven't figured out my lighting fully. So what I want to say is, if I go into rendered mode, my nodes will already be doing something, but not exactly something super specific. So I'm listening to myself and I'm like, fuck me, if I'm making like any sense. What I wanted to say is, when I'm building my scene at the first pass, for example, of lighting, I will want to have light and visible, light and node set up, because I won't have my light and node set up because I know that, let's disable the compositor. If I'm gonna continue working on the scene without like my post-processing, I will be already distracted by those darkest darks darkest darks, and maybe those whitest whites. So what really helps me a lot to push on my image is I have like a basic compositor node setup, and this might not be my final look, but I might work with this look, because if I keep working in the scene in this look, I'm getting away with more. I'm not as distracted by the colors are more unified, right? There is something correct happening with the colors, and this is enough for now. So I really prefer to work with my scene in this mode than in this mode, because this one already gives me some feeling, and I consider this to be like painterly setup, just because I'm using the lighten node, and just because I think I had some slight blur in here. Oh yeah, lens distortion in here, right? And then as I will continue with the image, I might be like, all right, dude, it's time to start pushing light, right? I want to use a different lighting setup. But as soon as I'm gonna start tweaking the light, then of course I need to start adjusting my my notes a bit. But this is, I would say, like, you will get this preset, because I consider this preset to be like a bit universal, but also I really want to let you know that this one preset won't work with every image, right? I just want to be perfectly clear that just because you will be using, for example, this one preset, your images still might not be there in terms of lighting, just because, for example, HDRI isn't there, or just because maybe the lighting is unified, or the sun isn't like set up correctly, right? So to re-emphasize, I always want to work with a bunch of nodes in the beginning, because I just can get away with so much more. Like, this is distracting, right? It looks very 3D, and this looks so much better. And I want you to know, I will never wait with post-processing till the end, right? As I'm advancing to the scene, I'm gonna be tweaking up the nodes. I'll be looking for different solutions. I will be using the difference value in here, but I will never wait with post-processing till the end, or I will not. I will rarely start pushing post-processing right in the beginning, because there is no point in adding post-processing when there is nothing on your scene, right? So to summarize, I will start building my scene. I will already have some nodes set up. I've carried over from the other file, but I'm not overlaying on it. I just want to have a lighting setup, the post-processing setup in a way where working in here will be pleasant, where the colors in here will be more unified. And with time, as I will be refining the scene, refining the lighting, I will be changing my compositor nodes. And I know it sounds all messy and whatnot, but here's the thing, like, doing correct post-processing and understanding your lighting and what the lighting is doing and what the textures are doing and what you want to achieve with post-processing, that's an entirely different tutorial, but I think I've said it already. All right, what's next?